Is it working? Blah 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 blah. I hate freeconferencecall.com. Lori Rawlings. Craig, are you on the line? Okay. Are we waiting for anyone else, Amalia? All right, I'll make sure that we are ready to go. Are we waiting for anyone else? Oh, okay. We'll just get started. It's after 12, so. Okay, I'm sorry for the delay, everybody. I'm Lori Rawlings, Executive Director, and you all know me, and I've asked Mike Gantert, who is the Director of the Milwaukee Building Trades United Pension Trust Fund, to give us an update today on the status of the fund and answer any questions you have about deep background or anything else you'd like to know about the pension fund. So thank you, Mike, for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. So just to give you an update on where the pension fund is at, we're currently, one of the requirements that the government has is, of course, what our funded percentage is. And there's various levels, 80% or more in your what you call green zone. And life is good, you don't have to do anything. I question that, and 65 to 80 is yellow zone. And then under 65 is red zone. And there's different actions that you have to take under each of those zones. If you're green zone, there's no action to take. If you're yellow zone, then the trustees have to adopt a funding improvement plan. And if you're red zone, then you have to take more drastic action and do a reorganizational plan. I said we're 75% funded, but the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act confuses things because they now have said that if a plan is in yellow zone, but the trustees have a funding improvement plan that the actuary says will get them back into green zone within 5 to 7 years, then we can be certified to be green zone. So the letters went out to everybody certifying that we're green zone. My personal opinion is we're not green zone. We're only 75% funded. And my certainly frustration with that, or question why the government did it, is when they say if your funding improvement plan will get you back in the green zone within 5 to 7 years, based on the plan meeting all of their actuarial assumptions during that period. Well, the biggest assumption that we deal with is our rate of return. We're currently at 7.5%. Now, anybody that's been around for a while knows that the market has not turned 7.5% every single year. It's up, it's down. Last year, we were at 11.2. The year before that, we were negative 0.3. Then we were at 86, 12.9, 15, and 1. So yeah, it fluctuates every year. So when you make assumptions based on we'll meet all of our actuarial assumptions, that really leaves the door open to question if we're going to reach them or not. So back as of June 2016, the trustees adopted a funding improvement plan because we were less than 80% funded. And what it called for was $1 as of June 1, 2016, 75 cents in 2017, and 25 cents as of this June 2018. So we've been through the 2 years, and just about all of the crafts that participate, there are 11 different crafts that participate in this fund, put the money in to maintain your benefit. This year, the actuary came in, and we have to look, we have a 3-year plan. But realistically, there is no such thing as a 3-year plan. Every year, our actuary has to do a funding projection report based on 10 years, June 1 through May 31. So here we are meeting with our actuary in February, trying to make projections of where we're going to be in May. Makes it a little more difficult because we don't know what the market is. The only 2 things that we can guarantee that we're going to meet are our contribution and our hour assumption. We all know that work is up. We don't have enough skilled labor to do all the work, all right? Last month, we sent out $1 million in contributions to other funds because of reciprocity. We don't have the workers, so they're coming in from other funds. We then transfer the money back to their own funds. So even though there's a lot of work there, we're not seeing the full credit of that. Okay, we're seeing a lesser amount. But even so, we're still meeting our actuarial assumptions on those two. So interest rate then becomes the big point, right? So he did that back based on June when we looked at being up 10%. I'm sorry, when the numbers we looked at back in February were based on December. The most recent that I have from our consultant is through February, and we were at 8.2%, so we're still meeting our 7.5%. Now, I know that the assets as of February were approximately $2,254,000. March, they were $2,240,000,000. So we dropped a little bit in assets because of the market, because we all know what's happening there. Every day it's up and down. We're not talking a few points. We're talking $100 here, $600 there. So even with that small decrease, we're still meeting our 7.5%. So when the actuary looked at it, if push came to shove, we really didn't need to put the 25 cents in. But we did it for several reasons. Not only is there a funding percentage that we have to deal with, there's something that the government calls the credit balance. To put it in our terms, that's nothing more than a checking account. It's a cash flow, money in, money out for the year. And we keep track of that balance. Currently, we're at $34.4 million for a positive credit balance. If that balance is projected to become a negative, that automatically drops us into red zone. The way that can happen is we're paying a heck of a lot more, and because of lack of work, we're not getting the contributions in. So for those 3 years prior to 2017, when there wasn't a lot of work going on, we were spending more than what was coming in. Contributions were based on hours of approximately 13 million. All right, well, that wasn't enough to fund it, so our credit balance was dropping down. Now, of course, with contributions up, our credit balance is going up, but the trustees want to leave the 25 cents in to help build that credit balance. So when we do the projections based on the actuary, if we meet all of our assumptions going forward with no contribution increase in the years coming forward to 2022, we're back up to 136 million. We want to be over 100 million because we want that cushion. So yeah, credit balance, I question when you have 2.26 billion in assets, okay, you're not broke. You know, if you have 1 year where you're paying out more than you're getting because we can't draw from that, but it's a regulation that the government has and we have to comply. So going back, we're at 75% funded for last year. We're projected to, if we meet all of our assumptions with the 25%, go up to 76%, and we won't hit the 80% mark, assuming we meet all of our assumptions until 2021. Of course, there are always two sides that look at this. You know, you have labor and you have management as trustees. Certainly management and labor, ideally would like this fund to be 100% funded, but we haven't been 100% funded since 2009, right? And it's only been the last 4 years that we've really been below 80%. And last year I explained why that happened. There are two things that cause us to drop below 80%. I gave you a couple of the actuarial assumptions, the interest rate, the hours worked, but there's a couple of other things that actuaries have to make assumptions on. The two that I'll discuss briefly that I went over last year are average life expectancy and average retirement age. A little over 2 years ago, average life expectancy was in this plan was 82. The National Society of Actuaries did a study and showed that people on average are living longer. We all hear that. The minute the National Society does it, then local actuaries have to look at that because that's an assumption that they have to certify being accurate. They did the study in blue collar, found out that people on average were living a year longer. That matched up with our study. People on average are living a year longer. That's fine. That's good news, right? But what's 1 year of liability mean to this plan? We pay out $170 million in benefits. We just picked up $170 million of liability. It has to go on the books. It's like a mortgage, right? You know, your roof goes out, your furnace goes out, you don't have the money, so you go and you take out a second mortgage. But the good news is you can pay it off over a certain period of time. One of the things that the government did that affects these plans tremendously was the Pension Plan Act of 2008, which went into effect in 2009. We used to be able to amortize, that's a fancy word for mortgage, these costs over 25 years. They stopped that. They said going forward, all costs have to be amortized over 15 years. We all know when we bought our first house, we had a mortgage. Thank God we got a 30-year mortgage. If the bank would have told me, sorry, you can only get a 15-year mortgage, I wouldn't have got the house because I couldn't afford the payments. Well, we don't have that choice. So that put a strain on the plan. We now can only fund that over 15 years. Long term, it's a good thing because you're not carrying the liability as long. Well, most things, when you implement them, there's a cost for that initially. Down the road, that'll even itself out and probably be better. But that may take 10 or 15 years to do. The other thing that happened was the actuary has to do another study to certify average retirement age. Right now, normal retirement is 63. Early is 55. Average retirement plan was 61. He did the study, and he came back and said it's 57. People are retiring early. I said, whoa, wait a minute. You did a 5-year study. 3 of those years were 13, 14, and 15, when there wasn't much work going on. People were retiring because they had to. I was getting calls saying, Mike, I don't know what to do. I'm hardly working, not enough work. And we all know, okay, the older population, quite honestly, when work slows down, okay, it's the younger guys that are getting the work, right? So they were calling, and I said, hey, you're eligible for benefit, take it. You know, don't lose your house, don't lose, whatever. Take the money. If work picks up, you can always go back to work. All you do is stop your benefit while you're working, all right, but at least you have something to fall back on. So the actuary agreed to cut it in half. Rather than the 3-year difference, it was 61 and a half, 57 and a half. I'm sorry, 60 and a half, 57 and a half. He cut it to 59. Now, why would that affect the plan? It's a good thing once again, right? Well, this plan is very unique. Up until 2016, our reduction for early retirement was 1% a year. Now, in Social Security, you can take your benefit out at 62, or you can wait till normal retirement age. I think mine was 66 when, but I don't know what it is now. But anyway, if you take it out early, your benefit was reduced by approximately 6% a year. Why? Because you're getting the same amount of benefits over a longer period of time. Same thing in this fund. Benefits are projected. What we call present value is determined based on what you get paid from age 63 average life expectancy 83. 20 years, we've got to pay that benefit out, okay, on average. Now all of a sudden people are taking the benefit 8 years earlier. It's coming out of the same pot of money. So the reduction is actually 6%. If you retire at 55, you're only going to get 52% of that benefit. However, both labor and management, realizing this is the construction trades, bodies get beat up. They want to give a guy an opportunity to retire earlier. But as I've said many times, that opportunity has nothing to do with age. You could tell me I could retire at 55, and when I told you you get $20 a month, you just told me I'm not retiring at 55. It's the money that does it. So what they did is they dropped that through the years. It used to be 6%. It was dropped to 3% and 2%. In 1997, it was dropped down to 1% a year. So a person retiring the first of the month following 55 only had his benefit reduced by 8%. He got 92% of his benefit. The plan subsidizes 40%. There's one person that retired. His normal benefit would have been $6,800. He took the first of the month following his 55th birthday. We reduced it by 8%. He got a little over $6,200 a month. Well, guess what? The plan is subsidizing $2,600 a month just for that one individual. So the more people you have retiring earlier, the more subsidy pressure you have on the plan. So that's why that added a tremendous cost when the actuary has to run those numbers. One of the things the trustees did then, okay, is they put in a higher reduction for early retirement. Because when we were at 1%, we were probably in the top 1%, or 1%. I'll be more a little conservative and say top 10% of the country's plans in the country with a percentage that low. All right. What the trustees did is they approved increasing that, and they did it on a graduated scale. If you're retired, and I use a percentage, but it's every month it decreases, obviously, okay? When it was 1%, it was 1/12 or 1% a month. What they did is they said, okay, if you retire at age 55, the reduction is 4%. At age 56, it's reduced to 3% a year. Okay? So it's 30% if you retired, 32% if you retired those 8 years earlier. Okay? Now all of a sudden you retire 2 years earlier at 3%, it's 21%. 2% at age 57, and then stayed at 1% at age 58. So there was a change to reduce the subsidy. But here's what you have to take into consideration. That was only for hours going forward. All the hours worked prior to June 1 of 2016 stayed at 1%. So a person retiring today who only has 2 years under this and 25 years under the other, that reduction is very small. We're not seeing anything. It's going to take at least 10 years out, possibly 15, to have at least half of those hours at the greater amount. But then in order to reward an individual that truly spent his life working in this industry, they say if you have 30 or more years at the time you retire, it's 1% for all hours regardless. Well, approximately 7% of the participants we have right now when we did the last study have more than 30 years. So that's only 7% of the people, okay? Not that much, and you are rewarding because, and the reason they did that is, as we know, people may start out working non-union. As they get older and have families, they realize, wait a minute here, I need some good benefits, all right? They start coming over and working union for the pension and the health. Well, they want to say, hey, we want to reward the guy that served his apprenticeship in his 20s and devoted his life to the industry. Not some guy that comes in afterwards. He's making money, but yeah, we're not going to, give them that 1% reduction. So that's why there was pressure on the plan that dropped it to not only just having the 1 year where we had a zero return, but these two things happening. Now, I've done a study since then on this average retirement age, and over the last 2 years, it hasn't changed that much. Still 70% of the people are retiring early. And of that 70%, approximately 40% are going out at age 55. Now, one of the things, there's two things, of course, that we don't see a change in those numbers yet. If the actuary comes in another study, and he said he would come back in a couple of years and check it again, there's going to be another decrease in the average retirement age. There's two reasons, in my opinion, why it hasn't dropped that much. Number one, as I pointed out earlier, it's only for hours going forward. So that's not an incentive for a guy to get out now, okay? And number two, it's a lot of work going on, okay? They're getting big hours in, that's adding to their benefit. You take an average contribution, and each craft has a different benefit level based on when they put money in through the years. They can no longer put money in to increase their benefits in 2009. Management blocked that and said until this plan is 100% funded, we're not going to allow any more increase in the benefits. I forgot where I was going for a second. So when the actuary is going to look at that again, because there's one of the two reasons. It doesn't affect a person that much because it's only for hours going forward, and there's a lot of work out there. So guys are continuing to work. If you can get 2,000 hours on, and where I was going with this is everybody has a different benefit, but I'm going to use the average. Okay, for instance, steam fitters at 142, plumbers are at 127. All right, everybody's a little bit different. Well, roofers are around $90. All right, but the average when you do it by participant is about $130 per thousand. So what's the incentive for a guy to keep working? Well, if I can get in 2,000 hours, which, hey, today, trust me, you can get in, okay. 2 times 130 is $260 a month just for working that 1 year that you added to his benefit. That's an incentive for guys to keep working. If I had that, trust me, I would jump on that. We all would. Okay, for 1 year, I'm getting paid. I got that money coming in, I'm getting overtime, and now I just added $260 a month for the rest of my life. Yep, sign me up. I keep working. So those are the things that have caused those numbers not to jump or drop as drastically as everybody thought. So those are the things that have gone on over the last year to where, the plan is. There is concern on both sides about the long-term solvency of this plan. Everybody got scared last year when the Milwaukee Journal did the article on the Teamsters Central States saying that the trustees were going to cut retiree benefits by 50%. Up until 2014, we could not do that. The federal government, under the Reform Act, has allowed trustees to reduce benefits if the plan is projected to become insolvent within 7 to 10 years based on the actuarial study. So when that paper hit, I think I spent most of my 8-hour day on the phone with retirees calling saying, are you cutting my benefits? No, we're not cutting your benefits, all right? But everybody was scared. And that question comes up now. A retiree used to say, hey, I don't care. It's not my problem. It's the active guy that has to pay for that's all the money that we put in this plan. $8 since 2004 to maintain came from the working member, not the retiree. Right? Well, now the retiree is saying, wait a minute. I hope this plan is funded properly. And the guy working today who's saying, that's okay, when I retire, I'm guaranteed. There's no guarantee anymore. Right? we have to make sure this plan is funded properly. So the trustees are looking at different alternatives. There's something out there in the marketplace, and when I go to the IF conference, they have quite a few sessions. It's called alternative plans for defined benefit. You'll see a lot of state plans are already going to this. What it is they set a standard for a plan that is over 100%. I've seen some at 110. I've seen some as high as 120. Okay, that is your funding level that you're going to maintain in the plan. Why 120? Why not just 100? Because with the market drop, you've got a cushion to where you don't have to overreact. And then what the plans do is they say, if we exceed the 120, we increase the benefit. If we drop below the 120, we decrease the benefit. We adjust every year, okay, to maintain the funding of the plan. That benefits both parties in what they're most interested in. Management, in that there is no unfunded liability. And labor, in that their benefits are guaranteed for a lifetime. You see some of the state plans have already gone through this. I think the teachers state plan in Wisconsin has that type of thing where they now adjust every year. And when you set the plan, that's the bare minimum. The benefit can go no lower. There's a problem with that for these plans, though. You can't just start this plan effective today and say, okay, here's our new standard. We're sitting with $700 million in unfunded liability. All right. That has to get paid off. So what some plans are looking at is saying, okay, how much of our contribution do we need to fund that? If we freeze that plan and we establish this new plan, how much of the contribution do we take out to fund that liability over the next 15 years, 20 years? So after that point, it's fully funded. And the new plan then, okay, can never have that because we're going to adjust annually. So the trustees have had the actuary look at that. There was discussion. There's certainly nothing where they're saying, oh, absolutely, this is the way we're going. They will continue to look at it. And hopefully somewhere down the road, they will go with that type of plan. And the reason is there's so many variables out there that trustees don't have control of. We don't control the market. We don't control the industry. And we certainly don't control the government. And they keep coming up with all these wonderful new things that affect us tremendously. So that's where it's at. We're not in critical shape. I mean, and they've taken action and they're looking at things. But yeah, I mean, there are things out there where when you look now at the level of benefits, I mean, we have people that are retiring $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month benefit. It's a wonderful benefit. All right. But then we're looking at a $12 contribution. And sitting on your side of the table, all right, as that contribution goes up, it makes you less competitive. There's a couple of terms out there, okay? One of them is prevailing wage issue. If it has to go to the lowest bidder, how do you compete when your fringe packages are 40% of your total? That's a concern. And, I think labor, is starting to understand. What I say when I do membership meetings and somebody says, well, how come we can't put more money in, to increase the benefit? I just look and sort of smile and say, you just did increase your benefit. How many hours did you work 2 years ago? 1,300. How many are you working now? 2,000. You get credit for every hour. That's what this plan is based on. It's all about jobs. When you're not working, you know how much benefit you accrue? 0. If there's jobs out there, you benefit from it. So start with worrying about jobs, because then both sides benefit and everybody's happy. So that's pretty much Just from an employer standpoint, obviously there's always concern about withdrawal liability. And of course, when MEPA came out I think it was MEPA, in 1980, that established withdrawal liability. They gave an exemption to building trades. The only way you can have withdrawal liability is if you stop working in this area. Take Bechtel. They came in and did the power plant. They were the only 5% contributor in this plan for the last 15 years. All right? Bechtel isn't doing any work here anymore. The power plant was their big thing. They're not getting hit with withdrawal liability because they stopped paying. All right? Bechtel would go non-union and build a power plant. Oh, trust me. Okay, that would have a tremendous impact because those contributions would come here. We've had employers that have closed. Okay. So what I've said is, withdrawal liability, yes, it is concerned, but not so much in the trades, because if there was a job to do, it doesn't matter if, due respect, you close your shop. There's going to be other companies out there who are bidding on that job. And if they're union, the hours come in. So if you're not doing them, we'll get them. The only thing that hurts us is if you stop and go non-union, and then those hours don't come in. And of course that happens. What happened to the Teamsters? Why did they go insolvent? Who was the biggest player in the Teamsters Central States? United Parcel. They probably represented over half the fund. Every year, United Parcel saw their withdrawal liability go up, estimate, because the small trucking companies were pulling out. And there's a rule. And so, okay, they're bankrupt. You don't get the money. That liability didn't go away. Finally, United Parcel said, we're pulling out of the plan. The union said, oh, yeah, you owe us $2 billion. United Parcel said, okay, here you go. We're out of the plan. United Parcel, because of that, is now sitting with 5 retirees for every active. They're spending $2 billion more than they're getting in every year. That's why the plan's going insolvent. What hurts the plan more than anything else is when your actives drop down to a level that can no longer support the plan.
What is our active to retire?
Right now, we're a little over 10,000 actives, and 2 years ago, we exceeded the 10,000 retirees, so we're 1 on 1. Not bad. There for a while, when work was slow, our actives dropped down to 8,300. So that's why our credit balance dropped so much, because, so that's why I keep going back to the most important thing here is jobs. And hours. But if they're done non-union, and as I said earlier, because we got here, it's nice we have a lot of work. We don't have the labor to do it. We shipped out $1 million in contributions to other funds through our reciprocity agreements because we need guys to come in. There for a while, the one craft that we have that always had a lot of reciprocity was iron workers. They go to big jobs. Our travelers, the stadium is being built. Trust me, we've got them from all over. We had it, here where they're coming in. You can just imagine what's going to happen with the place in Racina. We keep forgetting the name Foxconn. Yeah. And as you probably are aware of, there is a lengthy conversation going on at the international level between 118, 601, and 75 to merge. I attended a membership meeting in September, and the membership voted unanimously against the merger. I can tell you that the international is going to give one more try at it. If they vote against it, then in my opinion, it will put the local in trusteeship for not acting in the best interests of their participants, and they will create the merger. So I would say within the next 12 to 18 months, I would be surprised if there isn't a merger of 118 into 601 and 75. They only have 200 members. So, obviously, they don't have the membership to do those jobs there. I mean, my people are going to be coming in from all over the place to do it. We just hope we get a big enough share because those hours pull up this plan, and that would be a big project. Not only that, but all this, I think I heard, I forget what gas station company is already buying a property. They're projecting putting in like 10 or 12 gas stations around the area because of all the people who will be working there. So, I mean, that's a good thing. But once again, we'll see the benefit from that. We won't see, 100% of that benefit because we don't have the workforce to do it. And quite honestly, you never want to have the workforce to do that. Because once the job is over, what do you tell those wonderful people that you hired? Thanks for your services, see you. So you want to keep up the standards. So that's why reciprocity is nice. But that's only my opinion. So yeah, no, go ahead. No, it does not. Okay, because there has been discussion. I attended that meeting down there when they voted against it, just in case that came up. And I said, well, first of all, what you're voting on is a merger of the locals. It has nothing to do with pension. You will be given an opportunity, and I'm sure Local 75 and 601 would like all of their members under one plan rather than two. And that would be looked at. I said, I just had a brief overview of your plan, and I can tell you that it would give you benefit. Our plan is in excess of their contribution isn't as high, but the general feeling was they would probably agree to increase that contribution to get this benefit. I mean, we have things they don't have. Our benefits are higher. Their benefits are based on a year of credited service. And for a year of credited service, not 100% correct, but I think it's around $80 for a year of service. Well, a year of service here, I mean, and ours is based on hours, so you get credit for every hour. So a year of service could be arranged. You could have a 500-hour variance there where you're getting the same benefit. So just my initial look is, yes, it would be fair advantage to merge. And, if we're requested to do it, then the actuary and I will get together and the attorneys and see if it's feasible. We've done mergers in the past. We merged the steam construction industry. We merged the labor's fund. We actually, it wasn't so much a merger, but we brought in plumbers and steam fitters from Madison and Janesville. They had a defined contribution plan, so it wasn't a matter of merging the assets of the plan. It was merely negotiating into this plan, and they started earning credit going forward. But they were giving us credit for the years of service there. So if a guy had 20 years and only had 1 year to work here, he would be 100% vested in that 1 year. Because that was a concern for some people. Well, I don't have that many years. I'm going to retire in a couple of years. You're telling me 5 years vesting? Yeah, well, you already have 20 years, so you get credit for that. So that will be looked at, and in my opinion, certainly once it's laid out to the members, I think they would probably vote for it. But it takes my board to approve that, obviously. I could sit here and say what I want.
So these travelers are going to come in for Foxconn. They don't contribute to this plan if they're not within the locals. Is that true? Is that the way I understand it? Their contributions would go back to their own locals.
Yes and no. Some contracts have that contributions will be home funded. Other contracts do it the right way and say contributions will be paid into the jurisdiction in which you work, and then the fund process on that. My opinion is you never want to allow home funding. We run across that situation. All right. That contractor comes in from out of jurisdiction. We had one from Steam Fair, I forget the name of the contractor, who came in from Tennessee, somewhere down there. Well, guess what? The employers would love to have their wage package. They don't fund it. Contributions back to that fund. In some cases, they say, we'll pay you the wage share, and then we'll make sure that, the money goes back to your pension and health fund so you don't lose it. Well, it goes back to their rates. Their contributions, wage package, is at least $5 less. Could be sometimes 10. How do you bid against somebody that has a $10 less? You don't. So that's why personally, home funding is, and then the problem is, when I audit an employer, if he's out of state, how do I get that? I can request that he send up his records, but, good luck with that. So, yeah, some agreements have home funding, and we've had problems with it. We've had problems locally where we found out that they didn't pay the proper amount. And no, you weren't allowed to home fund. You paid here. Because that way everybody's playing from the same deck of cards. They use it that, it's more convenient because we don't want to hurt our employees. We don't want to jeopardize their benefits. In this age of computers, every month, okay, they fill an authorization out once. We have them saying, this is a reciprocity. Those hours get shipped out within 45 days after those contributions were received. So from a pension standpoint, they certainly get it in time. From a health point, because of the lag, they get it in time. It doesn't affect their eligibility unless the employer is delinquent and late in paying. But if he pays on time, the system works. So that's why when you bring up home funding, I just sort of, but there are contracts, internationals that say, we home funded because they want to protect the members. Well, it goes back to when you didn't have the computers. And I understand you want to protect the members' benefits to make sure that he doesn't lose his health because contributions, not getting there in time. But those times have changed. Absolutely not. Every penny. Yes, so that. And the higher contribution. In our fund, if somebody is working in Chicago, which I would think, or New York, probably has a higher contribution, right? Let's say I'm going to just round off numbers of $12. I know it's a little bit higher, but you're at $12. And they go to work in Chicago, and that's 13. Okay, that participant gets credit for that. I'm going to simplify it just to show you. Okay, if Chicago is 10 and you're 8, all right, they would get whatever that percentage is over and above of the 129 or what it is. So they would get the percentage increase in contribution onto their benefit. They would earn more for that higher contribution. So they get credit for every penny that's paid. If it's less, then we prorate their benefit. If we're 10 here and they work at 8 and we get 8 in, they're going to get 80% of that 129 or 142. Okay? It makes sense. You're not going to pay them the full amount because, hey, that benefit was based on a $10 contribution. I can't give you that benefit for $8, but I will give you your proportionate share. So yes, it is equal. But the only way you control that is to make sure the contributions are paid in the jurisdiction. Forget about the convenience, because that opens up, and I sit here and I tell you, I know for a fact employers have tried to play that game. Not everybody, but every now and then, they'll take advantage of that. And they'll tell the guy, hey, I'll pay you their wages and don't worry, all your benefits are going back. Well, of course he's happy to say that. He may have said $7 an hour on his bid because their total package is $7 less.
You'd mentioned there's 11 different crafts. What are those? What crafts are in this, are funding this pension fund?
Two biggest are carpenters and laborers. They represent a little over 20% of the plan. Then you have the next three largest. That would be plumbers, steam fitters, and iron workers. Then you have cement masons, heat and frost workers, painters, roofers, and tile layers.
Heat and frost insulators.
Yes.
And roofers, what was the last one?
Tile layers. Which is why we have a board that absolutely shocked me when I interviewed for this job, and they told me I report to 44 people. I came from an international fund that only had 30. How can you have, excuse me for saying this, 44 people in a little fund from Wisconsin? Well, not realizing it was multi-craft. Because when the fund was established in '59, every local that signed in a collective bargaining agreement requiring contributions to come into this fund obviously wanted representation on the board. But when you go back, okay, there was no district council. Carpenters had 7 local unions within the jurisdiction of Milwaukee. Laborers had, okay, everybody had, so everybody got a representative, and ERISA says that it has to be equally divided. So if there were 22 locals, that meant 22 labor guys, management had to have 22 also, because it has to be equal.
Is it possible to shrink that board now that there aren't 7 carpenter locals in this area? Has there been any discussion about that?
I would be more than happy to have you bring that up.
It seems like an unwieldy number.
It is. It's that's why I say we're committee driven, right? We have committees that are authorized to take action on behalf of the trustees for a lot of stuff. For instance, my eligibility committee committees are normally 10, 5, and 5, and they're the ones that approve benefits every month. And they're authorized to act in behalf of all 44 trustees. There are certain things that committees cannot act. For instance, the eligibility committee cannot, those 10 people cannot amend our plan document. It takes all 44. They can make a recommendation. It's just like the executive committee. They review the financials and the trust agreement. They cannot, investment committee can hire and fire managers. They cannot, by themselves, amend our pension investment policy and guidelines because you don't want 10 guys making those decisions, but they can make a recommendation. We recently, on a different subject that just comes up here, but let me finish that. For instance, they cannot make a change in our investment policy regarding our policy right now does not allow investments in certain things. All right. We don't want to risk. Well, 10 people couldn't make that decision. They could only make a recommendation. They're back in the early 2000s when tech stocks were going crazy. We're capped at 60% in equity. And the committee, because rates were so good, wanted to raise that to 70%. And they made a recommendation to the full board. The full board voted it down, saying no, just because the market conditions are good now When things are bad, we don't want that exposure. Going back to the 7.5%, we just made a change in the fund. We went out for an RFP for our investment consultant. We had Callan. We invested a few other firms. We decided to make a switch because there is concern that 7.5% is no longer a viable option. And our actuary is watching that very closely. And if he comes in and says that's not reasonable, we don't have a choice. And there are plans that have already dropped that rate down lower. But when you do, okay, that has an effect on your funding percentage. All right. So we're making changes, and we're changing quite a bit. We're going through it right now. We're terminating 6 of our managers because we're going in a different direction in some places. We're going to an index fund. On our real estate, we had 2 investment managers, multi-employer property and AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. We're adding a 3rd one. We're going with infrastructure because infrastructure has a little better return. They're averaging 8%. I've said this, I continue to say it. The thing that affected these plans the most has been fixed income. I'm dating myself. And some of you may have heard me say this. Back in the 70s, when I started, I worked for a third-party administrator, and when I got in, he said, "Now, Mike, any excess cash that comes in, call the bank downstairs, Northern Trust, and get a 6-month CD." 6-month CD? Why? You could get 15 or 18%. You could have all your money invested in fixed income and meet your 7.5% return. Can't do that anymore. After 2008, credit tightened up. The banks changed our world. All right, can't do it. So now we have to take a little more risk to meet our 7.5. We had something in this plan that was a wonderful idea that we were one of the minority that did, but it was a smart move back. They had it in here before I came. It's called an immunized bond portfolio. We took 20% of our fixed income and put it in long term. Because guess what? We were meeting that. No risk. Life was wonderful. And we had 20% of our liability covered. Part of this change, we had 2 managers that did immunized bond portfolios of NIS and Baird. We've informed them just within the last 30 days to terminate our immunized bond portfolios, take the money out of those long-term bonds, and put them in core and core plus because we need to get a better return. It was the right thing to do when you got the return, but long-term is never going to help you meet your 7.5. It just puts more responsibility on risk, and the last thing a pension fund wants to do is take risk. Very interesting. I can give you a story. When the market went bad, an employer called me up and said, for crying out loud, now they have to put more money in, and that comes from us. Why don't we just have all our money in treasuries? Why are we taking this risk? I said, you don't understand. We have an obligation, and it's long term. We've met our 7.5%. That's ridiculous. As well, that's reality. Isn't going to happen. A year later, a friend of mine sent me an article. There was a small fund in, I think it was an operating engineers fund in Indianapolis that got rid of all their equities and put it all in U.S. Treasuries. The market jumped back up. Department of Labor came in, penalized them for taking inappropriate action. And by doing so, penalized their participants by not getting a reasonable return. So they always put us on the edge. We can't be conservative. We have to take that risk to meet our 7.5. And there also is talk, obviously about will the day come when we have to. Well, the reason we're making all of these changes is to hopefully meet our 7.5% return without increasing our risk. We've never been in private equity so far. We've never been in the one that I'm trying to think of that everybody jumped on the bandwagon for a while. That was a good return. But yeah, we can't go there. We can't afford the risk.
So you mentioned that you real estate is part of your portfolio. Does this fund ever invest in developments in Milwaukee?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So can you give us any examples?
There are a couple. I can't think of the name of the buildings, but the one right here on Watertown Plank and 120 on the corner, the northeast corner. I forget what that building is. But that was funded through, I believe, MEPT. There was also one of the buildings by, that developer was looking at the court or the other one. Yeah, MEPT funded that. So, yes. So we were in that. So yes, they do. Unfortunately, we're a secondary market. Most of our money that we have with them is in New York and Chicago and San Francisco, and right. But yeah, we've had conversations, and we're looking at another fund. Obviously, we tell them, hey, when we have a project here, we contact them and say, hey, will you take a look at funding this building? But sometimes there's limitations. We used to be in the mortgage business, where we would actually work with U.S. Bank and we would fund mortgages. My first mortgage was at 12%. Guess what? You're not getting 12% anymore. And if I'm in the mortgage business, I'm taking a lot of risk. And what am I getting? 4% of my money? Can't do it. We got out of mortgages about, we stopped it a good 10 years ago, right after 2008. So things have changed that forced us to make change. And all we can do, of course, is to react to it. Yeah, if we could get 12% on mortgages, we'd be happy to be in that business. It is a little riskier. We took a hit on a couple of buildings. One was the old glass building. So yeah, all those things add into how the trustees, and I keep repeating, people look at the trustees and say, well, how come they're not making change? Well, we don't control. All we do is react. And sometimes change is difficult. I understand labor. Nobody wants to give up something they have. But sometimes you have to look at that. We all, have to deal with that in life. You have to make adjustments if you want to make sure that it's there long term. Anybody have any questions?
What are the contributions required for Tillman this year?
For which fund? Oh, what the increase?
Yeah,
25 cents. So far, the carpenters, because they're a district council and their membership doesn't vote on it, the delegates do. They've already voted to put the 25 cents in. So that covers millwrights, pile drivers, and the carpenters' basic agreement. Everybody else will have their allocations coming up. Laborers haven't voted on it yet. But everybody has to put the 20. It's equal across for all trades. And I haven't heard anybody else have their allocation meeting yet. Normally they have it sometime this month or in May, where they vote on their allocation. It's interesting because that subject came up. I'm dating myself again, but there was a time when I was also a consultant, and there was many a time where I sat in a room, smoke filled. Well, the union and employers were in negotiations because I had to be there because they said, well, Mike, what if we put 10 cents in our health fund? how much will that increase our room and board cost, or how much, this, and I'm running numbers, okay? Because you negotiated, absolutely, you negotiated every part of that. You negotiated the wage, you negotiated the pension, you negotiated, and management said, I'm not doing that. We're going to negotiate your total package. You worry about where the money has to go. And that happened about in the early 2000s. So now you negotiate a total package. And then the frustrating part in some cases was when they agreed to put $1 in on their pension, and management saying, wait a minute, you can't keep doing this to me. You can't do this. And they said, it's our wage package. Don't tell us how to spend our wage package. You want to go to arbitration? Get ready to pay our costs because you'll lose. That'd be like somebody telling me, hey, in your wages, Mike, you can only spend 10% on entertainment. Excuse me, it's not your wages, So yeah, that really changed it, because then you have no control of what they do when it comes to their pension plan as far as money required. If they've got, they could take it out of their, if it was $1 and they only had 80 cents, they could take 20 cents off of their wages and put it in to maintain the job. That's the realization of it.
So with all 11 trades investing into this fund, is there any of them that I guess are drawing more out than they're putting in that would actually be dragging down the rest of the rest of the fund? Or is that looked at and they're all pretty much even in terms of they follow the economy pretty evenly?
They do. When you look at what we call PSO rates for when each craft could put in money to increase, every craft had a different PSO rate. And it's based on two things. It's based on years of service and age. The older the group and the more service, the more costly, because obviously there's more liability involved. The craft that has the highest value for PSO is laborers. Why? Because guys start out as laborers and they move up to another trade. Because years ago, my God, when I was a laborer, the wages were lower. I'm working with cement masons and operating engineers. They see you're a hard worker and they say, hey, come on with us, come on into our apprenticeship program. Do we have a deal for you? Well, that's changed a little bit, but laborers are still, moving off into other crafts. So it is related per experience of, age, service, to try and make it equal.
Do you think we will reach 100% funding in this fund? And if so,
With change, yes.
what kind of change?
By taking a look and making changes in the plan subsidies. That's the biggest impact on a plan. So I go back to that early retirement reduction factor. All right. We have other things. Okay, that 30-year, a guarantee of 1%. You may have to change that somewhere down the road. At least add something, into there. We have a 24-month disability in this plan. The pension plans don't have a health plan for that. Okay, but we have it. And we don't coordinate it with anything. So you can get this and you can get workers' comp. And I've asked the trustees to look at that, and I've asked them to reduce that to 16 months, rather than 24, because, what a lot of people do is use that 24-month while they're filing with Social Security for a disability award, because that process can take time. It can take anywhere from 8 to 10 months to get that. Well, at least this way, they have income coming in, and then when they get the total and permanent, they switch over. So it's a nice thing to have, but the 24 months to me, you know, and there's one thing that I have said to the trustees. If a person goes back to work before the 24-month period, he has to pay all that money back that he got. He has to be out for the full 24 months. And he pays it back at the time he retires, over 180 months. So it's kind of like an interest-free loan. But here's my position on it. If a guy can go back to work and wants to, why are we penalizing him? We need him. The contributions are coming in. We stop paying the benefit. The only people we're really catering to are the people that nobody wants on a job in the first place. And they don't want to be on a job. You know, when a local declares full employment, and in these conditions they are, it's based on having less than 10% of your members on the return to work list. Well, guess what? That 10%, even the union doesn't want to send them on a job, and you don't want them. All right. Well, those are the guys that are going to ride out that 24 months because they don't want to go to work. They got to call and say, hey, got a job, I can put you to work for 3 months. Well, what? You want me to drive all the way over there and you're only going to let me work for 3 months? Forget it. I'll continue to, collect my money here. Why? So it just, I've asked them to look at that. It's coming up for discussion again. But it's those things. We have a death benefit here. But I've already told the trustees, in my opinion, don't even bother looking at the death benefit for a reduction. And here's why. All right. You earn a death benefit for every hour contributed or worked $1, up to a maximum of $50,000. It's what I call a decreasing term like benefit. Okay. Term life insurance, I have it, the office. Okay, guess what? It ends the last month in which I stop working. All right. Here we do it a little bit different. It's decreasing. When you retire, we subtract that amount by how much we pay you. So example, a guy is getting $2,500 a month. After 20 months, his benefit is decreased to zero. Well, with life expectancy of 83, and over 90% of the people don't have a benefit when they die. So what you're doing is helping a guy that when he dies relatively short afterwards, okay, it helps him a little bit. But it's not a big strain on the plan, so that's not something to look at. It's the early retirement. It's some of the other stuff. They have an extra benefit that they're paying for. $4 gets added on for longevity in your 21st year, and then another 8 on top of that for a total of 12. So if your benefit accrual for like steam fitters is 142, okay, in your 24th year it's 146. In your 31st year it's 154. All right. Good. Once again, want to reward the guys, but here's the problem. Or here's the thing I always say. You have a responsibility to protect the benefits to 100% of the participants. How many people are getting this extra benefit that everybody's paying for? On average, there's only 6% of the people that have over 30 years that are getting the benefit that everybody's paying for. Do you want to protect the benefit for 100% of the people? Or do you want to protect the benefit for 6% of the people at the cost of 100%? It's the same thing with 20%. There's another 15% that have over 20 years of service right now, right? And you're paying that extra benefit, but it comes from 100. Sure, it's a nice thing and you want to reward people. Well, my feeling is you want to protect everybody, and if you have to make that sacrifice, okay, to take a benefit away from a small group to protect that same person who's part of a larger group, then that's the way you go. So that's what I bring up to the trustees, and those are things we're looking at. There's no secret to that, and I understand it. Labor is hesitant to give something up that they have. Nobody wants to do that. But the day is coming. They've already started to look at that. They've started to talk about that, so there has been movement there. And that's where they asked the actuary to give them a study on some alternate plan things. They're looking at it. Have they done anything yet? No, because the process has started.
You're talking about early retirement. What is retirement age at 62?
Normal retirement is 63. And early is 55, so that's where I come up with the, 8 years earlier, when it was 1%, you retire at 55, you're still getting 92% of your benefit because we were only reducing at 8%. And I use percentage per year, but it is, it was 8% if you retired the first month following 55, you retired at 55 and a half, 7.5%, so yeah.
So the months where you get
less reduction, that's right.
So all the different trades pay this, they all pay a different rate, they all count a different rate.
That's correct.
It's just managed, they decide what they're putting in.
They decide what they're putting in, the trustees decide what they're getting out. Yes, because you cannot negotiate benefits in a contract. Trustees are authorized. You can ask them to, but I've had contracts where it came in and they had attached the schedule of the health benefits that they would get. And I sent them back their contract and said, thanks, but find some other place because we're not accepting it. Yeah, they can't. And why? Because the trustees, the fiduciaries, or it's holds them responsible for the benefits, so they're not going to let. Your wife related to mine. Careful, where I'm. She may call in and hear us.
You take our money and decide there. I can't get it. So, I can pay more than theirs, I can pay it out.
Any other questions? Yes, thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
As always, this has been very educational.
And if I say you ever have any questions, please call. I have something I say to the membership too. I get so frustrated. My buddy said, I said, don't disrespect me by thinking the guy sitting on the bar stool next to you knows more about your pension plan than I do. You just hear this stuff and it's like, I don't know where that's coming from, but that's not reality. That's not what happened. So yeah.
If a member of that fund comes to us, should we refer them?
And I tell the unions that also.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in that position. Climb up. Well, guess what? The question he asked has nothing to do with the answer that he's looking for. He doesn't even know how to ask the question. So then I'll say, well, okay, but you want, well, no, I don't mean that. I mean, and finally I get it down to, okay, here's your answer. So yeah, it can be a complex, situation. And every scenario is different. You talk about retirement, well, yeah, at age 55, there's what we call you have to show intent to retire. I don't know how many people you were kind enough to give them a job working in the office. Their bodies are beat up, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm taking it." Okay, so they pull out. They go to work as a non-union, in the office management, and they apply for benefits. And a year later, we send them a verification of employment form saying, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm working as an estimator in the office. Well, when you do that, well, day after I retire, guess what? Now you owe me a year of benefits and you have to reapply. Why? Because there's a special federal regulation that says you have to show intent to retire when you retire early. Once again, government comes up with these marvelous things. What does it mean? So our attorney said you cannot work for a contributing employer or the tools of the trade for 60 days from when your benefits start. So if you want to go to work in the office, take 60 days off and then go to work. We had an iron worker leave the iron workers and go to work as for sheet metal. Okay? When he was like 45. That's in their plan. When he was 55, he's not part of our plan anymore. He applied for benefits. Okay. So every year we sent out a verification of employment. I think the second year he finally said, yeah, I'm working as a sheet metal worker for Total Mechanical. Gee, Total Mechanical is a contributing employer. How long ago? Oh, ever since I started working here. Guess what? We paid you 2 years worth of benefits. You owe it all back, and you have to reapply.
That's after he takes early retirement, you're talking about.
You have to have that break. And, you know, to me, it doesn't make any sense, intent to retire, okay? So here's the guy. So now he wants to retire, all right? So he doesn't have any income, and I'm going to take part of his income when he needs it. So he's going to pay me back for 2 years. What was he getting? $3,000 a month? $72,000? No, we don't take it all back at once. We'll do a hardship, we'll hold one and then maybe take 20, 30%. You know, it's a big chunk. So yeah, and you have to be very careful because people will ask a question not understanding the rules. And then they give their own interpretation and say, oh, then I can go do this. No, you can't do that. It's just like working in full employment. We had this issue. Work crafts and steam fitters is getting ready to declare full employment. Plumbers already did. Right? When you retire, federal law says we cannot suspend your benefit if you work less than 40 hours in a month. Okay? Because we're the building trades, summer's our peak time. We're a little more liberal. We go to 320 hours in a calendar year, unlimited, and then 39 hours thereafter. Full employment bumps you up to 710 days you can work in a calendar year, and then 39 thereafter. So, we got to declare. They declared full employment. He's working out in Madison. We get the contributions coming in from reciprocity. It means you're working out of our jurisdiction. Come up and say, I see that you're working, or we send them a letter, so your benefits are suspended retroactive back to when you reached that 320, okay, for the last 3 months. What do you mean? I'm working under full employment. Excuse me. Full employment means within the jurisdiction of the local. If you're working in Madison, you're not helping us. You're helping the Madison Fund. We don't declare full employment for them. But people think 700, I can work in 720 wherever. No, it's here. It doesn't do me any good to have you working out there. We need you here. So people get confused by that. The rules aren't simple. And that's why I always say, please call. Because we need to clarify because it will affect your benefit. And, you know, the example that I always give to is, you know, and this just happened, an employer pays 40 hours on a guy after he worked at 310. Just watch your benefit for the month. because you already worked 320, and the following month you work 40 hours. You're going to penalize me for 1 hour? Come on. Yes, I am. Because you don't know the federal government. They will say our decision making is arbitrary and capricious, and they'll hang a penalty on us. All right? Because they'll say, oh, so then it's not really 39 hours, it's 40. Well, what about 41? Well, what if I work 42? What is your rule? What do you have in writing? Well, you have 39 hours. Oh, okay. Well, here. Yeah. We're not, So here's a guy that, making $35 an hour and getting a $3,000 benefit. He just threw away $3,000 to work to get $35. So that's why I tell guys, please monitor your hours, because I cannot and will not make exceptions. Am I still on?
Yeah.
Oh.
I just want to mention, and the staff, they really are very responsive and very available to answer questions. Not only for participants, but also for employers. So if you have any questions about your responsibilities, or you want to get an estimate of your
Withdrawal liability.
feel free to give my call.
Save you the time. Don't ask for Mike, ask for Charlie, the financial manager. And he'll be right on it. And I will tell you that, unlike a lot of other plans, we'll give it to you verbally for nothing. If you want it in writing, we'll give you, you have to pay us $100. In some other plans, the actuary calculates it. Your fee can be anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to get that. If you just want to know, like I said, what difference and trust me, if he gives it to you verbally, it's no different than what you get in writing that you paid $100 for. So, just saying, yeah, verbally, he'll run the numbers and call you back and say, here's your withdrawal. And, one of the things I talked about, if we're meeting and, we talk about withdrawal liability. So, based on the 25 cents going in, and we're meeting all of our assumptions going forward, all right, how does that affect our withdrawal liability? It takes all the way until the year 2026 for there to be no withdrawal liability in this plan.
What year is that?
2026.
So that assumes that 2026 or not.
Pretty much so, yes. Actually, we're 94% funded based on the projections, but withdrawal liability isn't the full amount of liability because there's two different factors. One is based on the actuarial rate of return, and one is based on the market rate of return projections. So that's why it's a little bit lower. We show, like for this year, we're going to have $482 million in withdrawal liability. It's come down a little bit. But the actual plan liability is over $700 million. Like I say, they make it complicated. You explain one thing and then they say, but you didn't say that. You said, liability is only $500 million. No, sorry, that was only withdrawal liability. Here's the actual, liability.
There's considered later in this plan.
It's what
They're
plumbers have. Yes. However, all right now, they have declared it for maintenance only. But we'll be declaring it for the full term. It's in total control of the local. I've had it where steam fitters have declared full employment, but only for certain welders in the Madison area because they had a big project going on and they were short there. So they control it. And the reason is you don't want some retiree going back to work when you got other people looking for work. And we all know, right? Employers develop relationships with employees. They're part of your family also. Trust me, in our times, you hate laying people off. You've got a good worker, and you say, hey, can you come back and help me? But they've got a guy who's raising a family who really needs to work. So that's why it's in total control of the local's hands. The person has to go in and fill out an acknowledgement that he knows the rules, and then that has to come from the local union because he has to verify that that's the area where they need him. It can't just be anything. And normally, once they declare it, like when they declare it for a journeyman, it covers everybody. But right now, they're only looking at the maintenance guys. But I've already been told probably within a month they'll declare it out for everybody.
Any questions? Thanks again, Mike.
My pleasure.
Very helpful. Always appreciate the time. The effort. So maybe ending the conference call just online. Have a great day. Yeah, it really shouldn't be around if you
That's okay. Put me in your office, and within 10 minutes, I'll tell you how much I don't know.
Don't say that. Don't scare these guys any more than you already have.